Ride with me to the other clans and we will defeat the sky people.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, and welcome out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, a podcast where two guys get together. We talk about horror, science fiction, movies, television, other genre type things, key influences on that particular topic of the week, and then things that topic in turn influenced. We've been doing it for a while now. If you're just joining us, though, we're so glad you're here. Hope that you would do something like, maybe give us a brief review, tell us what you think, email us, subscribe, do all those things that you can do. If you're returning, hey, welcome back. Glad to have you here. We're continuing into our 5th season now, which is crazy cool.
Yeah,
and
actually, today is March 13th.
It is March 13th, but we have to remember that when we're talking. Yeah. And my name is David. If you're new, I'm here with Tim, of course. Tim, what have you been doing? You been doing any genre-related activities this week?
Oh, my gosh. As usual, down those Shudder corridors, at least while the thing still exists. You scared me the other day when you said that Shudder may get canceled. I don't know. Hopefully it won't.
I don't know.
I watched a little movie that I talked about in a Coming to Get You recently called A Wounded Fawn.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that title because I thought it was unique.
Yeah, well, and it actually has a really great premise, and I would say it's a solid movie I might consider for the podcast. It falls apart a little bit in the third act, but it was obviously a 2022 movie directed by Travis Stevens. He did a movie I watched on a sick day a few years back called Girl on the Third Floor.
Okay.
And it's a very unique haunted house movie. Not memorable enough for me to put on our list. And I also watched Oz Perkins' movie, The Black Coat's Daughter, that day. And I remember not liking it as much either, but it had been on my radar because Oz Perkins is Tony Perkins' son and he directs horror movies. Anyway, aside from all that, this movie is also directed by Travis Stevens. It's called A Wounded Fawn. It was written by him and a guy named Nathan Fawdry, and stars Sarah Lind and Josh Rubin, who are both fantastic and unknown to me. But I think if you remember, the synopsis is: a serial killer brings an unsuspecting new victim on a weekend getaway to add another body to his ever-growing body count. She's buying into his faux charms, and he's eagerly lusting for blood. What could possibly go wrong? This is the one I mentioned that is filled with Greek imagery.
Okay.
There is like a Greek chorus kind of his victims that are like coming back, and you're like, are they really there, or is he seeing this in his head? It's masterfully directed. Lots of symbolic imagery, lots of the Greek influence, both mythological and tragic. It's really gory. And it has one of the most fucked up ending credit sequences you will ever watch.
Really?
Yeah. It's worth watching just to watch the entire credit sequence at the end.
Okay.
What else? I said, yeah, I mean, it's got a little bit of everything, but it's more cemented by the performances of its leads.
Okay. All right.
And of course, it's on Shudder. So if you want to see it, go check it out.
Wounded Fawn.
A Wounded Fawn.
Yes. Go. Is it a wounded fawn?
Yeah, a wounded fawn.
All right.
As in like a wounded animal that's being hunted. And basically, like I said, he's a serial killer, and he brings women out to this cabin. It's actually a very nice cabin, it's kind of modern.
Well, I pseudo violated our genre thing because it's a genre, but it's not really my particular genre. But I figure I could because many times I'm doing horror movies, even though my particular genre is science fiction sort of thing. But I appreciate both, as everyone knows. But kind of went to the action thriller thing because it's been on my list, my ever increasing list for years. But I went back and finally, because I was urged to do so by a couple of people, and I finally went, okay, I'll succumb to the pressure and do it. But I went back to 2014, almost 10 years old movie, and watched John Wick. Have you ever seen John Wick?
No, I saw the other day where you could still catch all of them for free on something, and I almost watched one, but I didn't. I've always wanted to, though.
I'm the same way. I think they've got 5 of them now or something, whatever. I don't know.
At least 3. Yeah.
So I said, and Joe Powell, friend of ours, has always said, great action, incredibly well-structured story. It's great. He's watched them all, loves them, yada, yada. But then again, he's a John Woo fan, and he likes the chopsaki sort of high action impact Jackie Chan stuff. I, had to force myself. And one of the reasons I haven't watched it in long is because it is Keanu, who I don't really appreciate very much as an actor. This, however, was fine for him, mostly again, because when I find that he's successful, he has maybe 6 lines of dialogue. So that works for me. This is similar to that. But there's something really, really fascinating about this movie. This movie relies on keys. It relies on cliches. From the very beginning of this movie, if you knew nothing about this movie, other than, John Wick is a former assassin, let's say, because that's what, everybody knows because of the basics of the story. And it's been 10 years almost. But if that's all you knew, then this is just rote for rote, relying every scene on you knowing what's coming next. He pulls into a gas station and a guy compliments his car and calls him a bitch. And he calls him a bitch back and drives away. Well, now those are the bad guys. They're going to find him and bad things are going to happen. You just know. I mean, it's just so predictable all the way through it. But
intentionally.
Yes, I think they wrote it saying, okay, we know the audience will buy this and go along with us, because they don't give a lot of backstory. They don't give a lot of history of these characters. They just throw you into this entire culture of hitmen and violence and everything. And a lot of people know the stats of it. There are 77 murders in this movie.
Wow, that's a big body count.
It's a huge body count. And none of them are simple either. It is very well staged. All the fight, stunts, choreography, action, murders are really well staged. The lighting is fantastic all the way through it. And the music is pretty good. Also, this subculture that develops, not giving stuff away, but there are particular organizations that cater entirely to this mafioso assassin group. It's almost like a James Bond feel to it. You go into the fake building and go downstairs and suddenly there's an arsenal that's, stays there 24/7 in case you're in town and just need a gun, or whatever. Kind of like there's another movie that was out where the guy goes to the hospital and it's only a hospital for wounded secret agents. Have you heard about that? It's another movie. Jodie Foster's in it. I can't remember the title right now. Anyway, but it looks like a normal hotel building on the outside, but actually it's a very, very advanced hospital for people for secret agents who are wounded. And, covered, they never have to go in public and yada, yada, cover up the crime. So I say that just because it's this whole subculture, which I actually found interesting, was thinking, okay, I may watch the second one of this because it's pretty compelling. I've got to admit, I ended up enjoying it overall just for the way it relies on you knowing what's coming next. You know that last third, oh, it looks like he's winning. Well, he won't, because the very, very teaser of it is him wrecking a car and getting out with wounded. And he's not right now. So we know we haven't hit that point in the story yet. So it's coming. It's that kind of thing. And I found it just fascinating, because normally, you and I watch movies and we look for keys, and we see keys, or we see influences, or we see, as writers too, we can kind of predict kind of what's going to happen and where the plot's taking us. This says, no, I'm not even going to give you that backstory. You know that right now he's going into the club, and everybody in that club has a freaking weapon, and they're all going to fight him. Even the girls are going to pull out, from their garters, they're going to pull out stilettos or something,
Right.
So it's a very interesting cliche-filled movie that actually works. I'm curious to see how they build the mythos into like 3 or 4 movies, but that was my genre week. I watched some action genre.
Some action.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we went from serial killer Wounded Fawn to John Wick Vengeance movie, and both are a little dark. As Tim reaches for a segue.
Well, they do hit the there's people on the outside that have secret pasts and secret lives, and they're lying about themselves, kind of thing, which is what I think Devil's Backbone has a lot of.
This movie's a ghost story. It ain't got nothing to do with those other movies.
It is a good ghost story, though.
But as David said, we are talking about The Devil's Backbone today. This is our second venture into Guillermo Del Toro's oeuvre. Am I wrong? No, I think that's right.
It's second, because we did Pan's Labyrinth.
We did Pan's Labyrinth, and that was last season, I believe. This movie is a little older. It came out in 2001. I'm going to read the synopsis. After losing his father, 10-year-old Carlos arrives at the Santa Lucia School, which shelters orphans of the Republic militia and politicians. He is taken in by the steely headmistress, Carmen, and the kindly professor, Casares. Yeah, it has an S on it. It's not Caesar, it's Casares. Soon after his arrival, Carlos has a run-in with the violent caretaker, Jacinto. Gradually, Carlos uncovers the secrets of the school, including a youthful ghost that wanders the grounds. Very Guillermo del Toro story. We've seen this before. And I believe I mentioned when we did Pan's Labyrinth that he has envisioned a trilogy around the Spanish Civil War, and that this was the first one, and Pan's Labyrinth was the second.
That makes sense.
So there could be a third.
Well, this is set in 1939. It's like you said, it is the Spanish Civil War. We're basically with the Republican heroes. That's who this orphanage is secretly supporting with their hidden gold. Are the rebels, essentially. And I had never seen this movie before.
I was going to ask you what your first impression was.
I had never heard of this movie before, actually. I mean, even in Pan's Labyrinth, we may have mentioned it or whatever. And when you first put it on the list, and I looked at it last year, I was confusing it with another one that I can't think of right now, but I think is something with a backbone, or something, which was another, I think, ghost story and abuse story. But I need to look it up and see what I'm confusing it with.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know what you're talking about.
But it's a very, actually, I should look it up, because it should be in my notes for this movie, because it's very
Go ahead and look it up, because I can talk just a bit. I'm pretty sure I was looking at my list. This may be the first foreign film we've covered this season.
Really?
And that excludes English or Canadian movies where they're English speaking. This movie is a Spanish language movie, folks. So if you don't like subtitles, you're not going to enjoy it. However, I think you're missing it if you don't watch it, because I love this movie. I think it's great. I found out something about Guillermo del Toro that I did not know. while researching this movie. Did you know that he studied special effects with Dick Smith?
No, I did not know that at all.
Yeah, he started off as a special effects person and spent 10 years doing makeup and stuff and formed his own company called Necropia.
Huh.
And then eventually segued over into directing films. I had no idea that he worked with Dick Smith.
I did not either, but that's awesome because I love Dick Smith.
Yeah. He is also very close friends with fellow Mexican filmmakers Alfonso Cuarón, who we have covered, I think, twice on this. Didn't he do Gravity and something else?
Yeah, he did Gravity.
And then another one that we haven't covered named Alejandro Iñárritu. Iñárritu. And they are collectively known as the Three Amigos of Cinema.
Yeah, the Mexican filmmakers. They're like,
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're kind of like Lucas Spielberg and Milius and all of them were that group who all share their ideas together. They all work with each other, and I think two of them have won Oscars.
Well, Guillermo definitely has. Oh, Cuarón probably has too, at least for cinematography.
Sure. I think he won for Gravity, and I think Iñárritu, didn't he do The Revenant? You're
right, he did do The Revenant, and I think that won at least some awards. I don't know if it won Best Picture,
but yeah. So yeah, they've done. They're obviously great storytellers.
Okay. I found out something else that we've talked about when we were doing Pan's Labyrinth that I couldn't make the connection of, and that is how Guillermo is a Mexican filmmaker, but a lot of his movies were filmed in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered that at I don't know if I have the name of this down, but at a Spanish film festival, he was showing this film, and Pedro Almodóvar saw it and said, I want to produce your next movie. Oh, no, I take that back. I think he was showing Kronos, and Pedro Almodóvar said, I want to do your next movie, and Almodóvar produced this one, The Devil's Backbone.
Well, it is an amazing movie. Again, I got it confused going into it because I was thinking Devil's Reign, Devil's Stepchild, We've had so many Devils movies.
It's my fault. I like Devil cinema.
It's a subgenre. Devil cinema.
Right.
But this movie from the very beginning is just epically directed, lit, told. I mean, it has a lot of a spaghetti western kind of feel to it to begin with, a very Sergio Leone kind of feel, but also with a David Lean kind of mentality. We're taking these simple stories set in this very big tapestry of this war and what's happening, and it's outside the walls, but it could come crashing in at any time, kind of thing. And I really loved the characters and the way he told the story. I loved the tagline. I found it looking on IMDb of "The living will always be more dangerous than the dead." I thought that was a great tagline for this movie. And it's Del Toro. He does not scrimp on horrifying scenes where you're in peril, whether that's with a ghost or with a living person. And people with secrets, some of those secrets being very good and nice, as in Pan's Labyrinth and a couple of places, but other ones with these sadistic, twisted, evil villains in them. I do think a huge key for this is Pan's Labyrinth. It does feel like there's a similar, we're a child's viewpoint looking at a bigger situation that they can't understand, yet there's a human villain in it that is just horrible. I mean, they're just a horrible person that is just barely holding on to I think their own sanity, let alone the veneer of existing in this wherever they are. In Pan's Labyrinth, it's at whatever the hotel is, or that little small village, and here it's the orphanage. Of course, orphanages are scary anyway. They're just scary places where bullies live?
I think there was an orphanage movie out recently, a horror movie.
There's several.
There's
orphanage.
There is. There's actually a Spanish language one too that I think Del Toro may have produced.
I think he did produce it. It was called The Orphanage. Yeah. I think was what it's called. Yes. But I was really pleased after I watched it. I mean, it was a good movie. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I'm going to correct myself real quick. That film festival where Almodovar saw Kronos was actually the Miami Film Festival, and he invited Del Toro to let him produce his next film, which was this one. And that's why this is a movie that was filmed in Spain. You're right; it does look like a Sergio Leone movie. That is a very good key that I did not come up with. I guess because it's very desert-y looking.
Well, it's his use of gold. So he uses gold in his palette, even when even the water is gold. It's like amber, kind of stuff. And so he uses gold a lot in the palette, which gives it a very Leone feel, in my opinion. And he cast it really well. I mean, I fell in love with it from the opening credits because the credits are done like fire behind the letters, and then you realize it's not fire, it's the water. It's water and bubbles and stuff. And is it water? I don't know. Is it goo?
It's very odd.
What is it? That kind of stuff. So it was really unique, even from the opening credit sequence.
It was written by Del Toro, obviously, but also in collaboration with Antonio Tresoras, a Spanish film producer and director, and David Munoz, a Spanish writer and director. So I don't know if these were friends of Almodovar's that he paired them up with. And apparently it was a story that it was a labor of love for him. He wrote this story when he was in college, and it was 16 years in development.
Those are sometimes the best. I also have in my trivia notes that I don't know if it prompted him, but he really saw the ghost of his uncle when he was younger.
I think I read that too.
He has always believed that ghosts are real, that ghosts are actual, not a fantasy. And so that definitely plays into this. This also has a lot of, I didn't list all the key movies that have used this, but even down to the Stephen King, the Ghost Story, the movie
Straub.
and the book, Peter Straub, but with this person who was wrongfully killed coming back to not seek vengeance so much as tell their story, to be recognized or healed or, whatever. Move on.
Go into the light, Carol Ann.
Yeah, go into the light, Carol Ann. Yeah, but Poltergeist is another. That's true. All of those ghosts of the cemetery kind of thing who want to be, go into the light. But it has But that's just a minor component to this story. The ghost is really a minor component.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot more story going on than just that ghost.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. I wanted, before we move on to that and some scenes, I did want to say that I mentioned this is part of a potential trilogy.
Yes.
But since right now it's just two films, he refers to them as sibling films, and that this one is the masculine one and that Pan's Labyrinth is the feminine one.
Makes sense.
Which
Totally
I thought
makes
was
sense.
very poetic and very profound at the same time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I like his, and I'm wondering, especially based on Cabinet of Curiosities and the stories that he's procuring for that or kind of curating for that, if he really likes this very subtle ending twist that he's so used to. It's not a Rod Serling in your face, oh my God, flip. Both of these movies, this and Pan's Labyrinth, have that little twist at the end. In Pan's Labyrinth, it's that, no, she really does die. I'm sorry. She's the girl dies at the end, kind of thing. No spoilers. Haha. Yeah. But in this, it's that we realize the narrator isn't the boy. The narrator from the very beginning is the teacher, the professor.
Right.
And he's a ghost at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, yes, it's such a nice little subtle Gothic thing to put in there. And I really liked that.
I will go ahead and reveal yet another key. It's very Road Warrior-esque as far as the narrator.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that, but that's really cool. Yes.
Where you realize at the end of the movie, the Road Warrior, it's actually that child, that beast-like child that is the one.
The feral kid. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, the feral kid. That makes sense. I like that. I hadn't thought of it from a Road Warrior perspective, but that's true because he does the VO at the beginning, and then he does, at the end, you get the rationalization or the realization of who it is actually.
Of who it is that's actually narrating the film.
Right.
So it's kind of an unreliable narrator for a moment until the end when everything is rectified, I guess you would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or an unknown narrator. That's probably a better word.
Yeah.
Any scenes that stick out
Wow.
to you?
They're just
a lot because he's a visual director. I mean, everything he does looks beautiful.
Every scene in the basement is memorable and good.
You're talking about where the little reservoir of water is, where the ghost actually drowned.
Where the ghost actually drowned. We saw it in flashback to begin with, and then we actually learn more as people go down there and more of the mystery is revealed. But all of those sequences work really well for me. The one big action piece or sequence piece I remember that I liked a lot was the water, going to get water. He spills water at night because he sees the ghost. The bully makes him go get water with him, so he's going too. And then that whole adventure from getting chained into the kitchen and how do we get out and almost getting caught by the caretaker.
I don't think he spills water. I think, doesn't the ghost knock several pitchers over?
I thought he did. He's running after the ghost and bumps into the table, which knocks the pitcher over. And they both have to go and get it. And then he's set up because at the very end, they actually shoot a slingshot out the window and break the water pitcher.
And he gets busted by, it's Jacinto.
Jacinto, yeah.
And Jacinto, we learn, he ends up being the main antagonist as far as the villain.
Very much.
But he was an orphan at the same orphanage. He grew up there.
Yes.
Which is kind of surprising because he pulls like a switcheroo on you where he paints one of the orphans to be the villain that ends up being a friend at the end.
Yes.
So all the boys are they're just kind of hazing the newcomer to the orphanage. But they, one of them in particular, the one that fires that shot that breaks the pitcher, seems like he's going to be the villain, and it's not him. It ends up being Jacinto for sure.
Oh my gosh, in so many ways.
Yeah.
The two major scenes between Casares and Carmen, not Carmen, the headmistress.
That is her name, isn't it?
Is it Carmen?
I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All of their scenes, their relationship, everything is really great, and I thought well told. And
it's great platonically. Sexually, she's sleeping with Jacinto because I guess
she has since he was a boy. By the way, that's the impression I get.
I know. At first, I was thinking, well, maybe Casares is impotent and allows this to go on, but he doesn't. I don't think he is. I think he knows it's been going on for a long time.
Oh yeah. But he has that, whatever you need, dear, sort of attitude to him. But his protecting of the children and everything is great. I guess my other scenes, I guess they're in a category, and there's two that jump out, which is Guillermo Del Toro does not skimp on the horrifying. And I don't mean that just in scary scenes or whatever, in like horrible violence or whatever. In Pan's Labyrinth, he'll show somebody stitching up their cheek that they cut with a straight razor. He'll show somebody stabbing a guy to death with a beer bottle. And in this, it's killing the girl, having Jacinto actually kill her after she is going for help because of everything that's happened at the orphanage. She's going for help, and he literally stabs her to death on the road. And you're just like, that didn't happen. Did that just happen? Really? That sort of thing. And the other one is the explosion. And then following that up by just showing dead bodies of children everywhere. I mean, that was dramatic and horrifying and terrible. And he does it so well.
Right.
It's really, really an incredibly put together movie, I think.
I was going to get to my scenes, and one of the things I wanted to ask you, because so many are in my head, I'm kind of bombarded by them right now.
Oh yeah.
What did you think of the effect? First of all, the ghost gets hit by a brick, and he has a cracked open head.
Yeah.
But whenever you see the ghost, you see the blood wisp out of his head as if he's still in water.
Yep.
It's the weirdest special effect. But
it's brilliant. It's a great idea. It immediately separates him as a ghost. It looks gory, but not horrifically gory. It's not like dripping down his face kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it alludes to where his body ended up, which is in the water.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a brilliant idea. And the way, even as he moves, it kind of just wafts around him kind of thing. It's really a cool idea. And I'm assuming it's Del Toro's.
We just mentioned that he studied under Dick Smith, so I'm assuming that it was his idea.
And he loves creatures. He loves creature design. I think we talked when we did the Cabinet of Curiosities about the fact that one of his stipulation with all the directors is he gets to be there for the creature design meetings.
For the creature design. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And him and Doug Jones are like best buds now too.
And like the image you have behind you of the almost like, I don't want to say zombified, but like decomposing ghost, those are only fleeting images. They don't do that a lot. The rest of the time, he is this kind of ethereal sort of blood wafting out of his head, goldeny kind of look to him. So it's only for these scare moments or jump scares when he has this kind of horror look. I think.
What did you think? I love the opening of the movie when the planes are flying overhead and dropping the bombs. And we have an instance where one lands in this orphanage and doesn't detonate.
Yes.
So the whole time he is growing up or learning to adapt to living in this orphanage, there's this giant bomb out in the courtyard just sitting there.
An unexploded bomb, by the way.
Yeah, and they'll go up and hide behind it, or they'll knock on it, or.
And some people will say, it doesn't work, and then another one of the kids will say, no, if you put your ear to it, you can hear it still ticking.
You can hear it.
And I think that's his huge metaphor for the whole movie of there's something right in the middle of all of us that is bad, really, really bad. And it's going to come and bite us in the ass one day somehow.
And the end of this movie is going to look like an explosion.
It's going to explode. Yeah. And that's either the ghost, which I wish I remember his name, but anyway, Santi. It's either Santi is going to explode on us in some way, or Jacinto is going to explode on us some way, or the war. Well, actually, but all of these things are right there, always omnipresent around. And I think that's, the bomb was his metaphor for that. So,
and what we haven't said in as far as the plot is that Jacinto is responsible for Santi's death. because Jacinto ends up tying him up and throwing him into that water before he really is dead. His head is cracked and he's bleeding, but he's not dead. And Jacinto kind of finishes the job by drowning him in that reservoir. And basically, Santy's goal is not to scare the main kid. What's his name? Carlos? Is that? No. Is it? What is the main kid's name? I can't remember.
You got me.
Is it Jamie? Or is Jamie the mean one? I think Carlos is the
Carlos is the lead,
and I think Jamie is the one that's mean at first. Anyway, what Santy is doing is trying to get Carlos and others to know what happened to him, so that perhaps he can go into the light, as Carol Ann, I mean, as the chick on Poltergeist says, to know the truth, basically, of why he died.
And great storytelling in the fact of how you tell the story, because for a good half of this movie, we are convinced that Jamie is the one that actually killed Santy.
Yes.
Because he is shown crying beside the reservoir. He's obviously was there the night it happened. And the inference that we as an audience make is he's the bad guy. That's why he's the bad guy. And it's not until near the end that we find out, no, he just witnessed what Jacinto did.
That would be another scene that sticks out to me, is that flashback scene.
Oh, yeah.
You see Santy get killed by Jacinto and Jamie witnesses it.
Right. And you see that Jacinto could have saved him. He probably may have lived even, but instead he wants to cover up his crime and he, drowns him.
So he's guilty, or at least has a guilty conscience of it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
The movie's title, what do you think of that?
I wish it was different, quite honestly, because like I said, it gave me the wrong impression going into it. Just because of other Devils movies, the reference that he directly makes in the movie is when Casares is talking about villagers believing in bad things, like ghosts and stuff like that. And he shows an example of a fetus that he has that has a a birth defect in the spine. And he says,
it's called spina bifida.
Bifida, I think is the way they pronounce it. Yes.
Okay.
And the townsfolk refer to that as the devil's backbone, like the child was cursed, kind of thing. And he's talking about myth and legend and fears and all of that. But I see the bomb metaphor a lot more than I see the title metaphor. I'm not getting what that meant.
When you hear the word devil, you immediately think, a devil movie or a satanic movie or what have you. You don't think of a ghost story.
Also, Devil's Backbone. I'm thinking, is this a Rob Zombie movie that I didn't know about?
That's kind of what it sounds like. Yeah.
And I think it would get a lot more maybe attention or interest if it didn't have that title, in my opinion. But I do. I like the movie's great regardless. I just wish it did have a different title, and I don't have a good suggestion for that. Santy's Misfits. I don't know.
I mean, I'm not so sure that Pan's Labyrinth is a good title either, but what else are you going to call it? My second Spanish Civil War ghost story or whatever, horror story.
Well, he couldn't call it literally just Labyrinth because that had been taken.
Right.
Pan's Labyrinth does give it kind of a mythic sort of feel to it,
and there is a labyrinth that she visits in the film, so it does make a little bit more sense. I'm not sure what they would call this, the Devil's Orphanage.
I wouldn't even do devils in it. I would go more toward Ghost or Santy or something like that.
Yeah,
that would give it more of a
an emphasis more on a haunting story than evil story.
Than an evil
devil sounds
story.
Evil.
Correct. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And there's not evil. I mean, the evil in this is human.
It's not supernatural. Human, and that's also one of my keys I'll get to later. Do you want to talk about cast? Obviously, I'm not going to have a lot because it's a Spanish cast. However, Marisa Paredes plays Carmen. And I thought, wow, she looks familiar. Then I realized, of course, she is a Spanish actress. She
Yes.
has been in several Pedro Almodovar movies.
Oh.
For those of you out there that don't know who Pedro Almodovar is, he is an award-winning, Academy Award-winning Spanish director that still makes predominantly Spanish films. I don't think he's done an English language film, has he?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Yeah, I don't think
He's
so.
solely
But
Spanish.
he came onto my map back in the 80s when he did Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down with Antonio Banderas and Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. He's a very
Yep.
well-known dramatic and comedic director. And Marisa has been in his movies All About My Mother, The Skin I Live In, and High Heels, just to name three.
And Skin I Live In, I think, is Banderas too.
Banderas has been in at least 8 of his movies. Yeah. I think he basically discovered Antonio Banderas when he was a teenager.
Good discovery.
I mean, the first time I ever saw Banderas in anything was in Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down.
Yep. I think
that
so.
Was like
Me
1987,
too.
Maybe.
I think I saw that, and then the next one was the Bandito movie or the
Desperado.
Desperado.
Yeah, Robert Rodriguez.
Well, and you know how I love behind the scenes or writer's room stuff and all of that. I would love to know where the decision was made with Carmen's character to take her leg and give her a wooden prosthetic leg. I thought that was a unique choice. It was totally unnecessary to the story in any way, but it was a cool choice.
Well, they were hiding the gold in her legs at the end.
At the end, yes, but I don't think she cut her leg off to put the gold in. You know what I mean? I think it was just a unique choice to give her that as an actress, and I'm curious, and as a character, did they say, oh, we need something, give her a limp, or we need her to be weak in a way? That's why she's the head of the orphanage.
It was a war wound.
I know. I think we do assume that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think that was a really interesting choice. I'd love to see how that developed.
Yeah, I think it was just to give a little bit more emphasis that we are still in the Spanish Civil War. I don't know.
Could be.
I don't know that much about the Spanish Civil War, but the fact that she has an injury where she lost her leg and that there's a bomb in the courtyard is enough to say, hey, there's a war going.
There's something going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Edward Noriega played Jacinto. I don't have anything else on him, but he is great. And God, does he not look like Eli Roth at times when you're watching him?
A lot. There were a couple of scenes where I thought Eli must have been his stand-in or something. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not even sure Eli was, I guess he was around then. I don't know. Cause this was in what, 2001? Yeah. Yeah, he probably was. Federico Lupi was
Casares?
He's Casares. Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry. He plays Casares in this movie, but I recognized him from something else and something I haven't seen in a very long time, which is Del Toro's first movie, Kronos. And he played Jesus Grease, the lead in that movie.
Okay. Maybe that's where I recognized him from.
Well, you might also recognize him from other Guillermo movies, because he played Manny in Mimic, that movie about the cockroaches and the subway.
Cockroaches, yeah.
And he played the king of the underworld in Pan's Labyrinth, the one up on that really tall throne. You really can't see him that well.
Yep.
So he plays father figures in Guillermo's movies. So I guess he is a father figure to Guillermo.
That's good. That's really cool.
Potentially. Fernando Tielve played Carlos. The only other thing I have with him is that he had a very small part in Pan's Labyrinth.
Okay.
Hoven Gear, I cannot pronounce these words. Anyway, number 2. So I can tell it's a small part because it has a 2 after it.
Okay.
In Pan's Labyrinth. And then honestly, I don't have anything else. I mean, we have Inigo Garces played Jamie. He's great too.
He is good.
Irene Vicedo played Conchita. She is the older girl who I'm assuming is another orphan from there that is kind of in love with Jacinto, would you say? Or at least at one time may have been?
I got the impression she wasn't an orphan, that she was brought there, kind of like they were. She was like the nurse or the cook or the something. Or
But she's very young.
she is young, but
Yeah.
she's mid-20-ish kind of
Okay.
thing. So I got the impression she was another employee there. Jacinto just happens to have, been elevated to the caretaker or the groundskeeper.
Well, I
or
get
whatever.
the impression that Jacinto is not just hopping in the sack with Carmen. I have the feeling he might have been hopping in the sack with
definitely was.
Rita as well,
Definitely was.
who is closer to him in age.
Yep.
And she's great. I actually have a picture of her somewhere.
Yeah, she
Right
was
there.
really
There
good.
she is.
And in doing some research, found out that she's been in a Spanish television series
Oh,
since 2001. She's still in it.
it's just a long running series.
Yeah, I guess it's their version of a soap opera, maybe.
Telenovela or whatever.
Yeah, and she has been in it from 2001 to 2022. That's her big IMDb credit.
Okay.
She's been in 251 episodes of it.
Yeah, it sounds like a soap.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, but she was great. I thought she was fine. Like I said, one of the impressionable scenes I had was the scene where, her death scene, because it was really impactful. I was going, he won't do. Oh, he did.
He kills her in the road. He
Yeah.
just leaves her in a dirt road
and drives away.
Yeah, stabs her. It's terrible. It's a very memorable death scene, though, like you said.
Very memorable.
That is really all I have as far as, other than names of other cast members. Junio Valverde played Santi, who we basically only see in a flashback, as not a ghost. Normally, if we see him, he is the ghost of the story.
Yeah.
As far as awards, I do have some things this won awards for. The Amsterdam Fantastic Film Festival of 2002 gave Guillermo Del Toro the award for Grand Prize of European Fantasy Film.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have mentioned whatever that film festival was before, the Fantastique or whatever is now the Girardimer Film Festival in France. And it won 3 awards all to Guillermo. One was the International Critics Award, one was the Special Jury Prize, and one was the Youth Jury Prize. I guess because there's so many young people in this movie. Our friends at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films nominated it for a Saturn Award for Best Horror Film. It didn't win. I should have looked to see what won that year, because I can see why it was in the running. And then the Fango Chainsaw Awards nominated it for 4, including Best Limited Release, Direct to Video, because obviously it probably wasn't released as a film over here. Best Supporting Actor, Federico Lupi, who played, as I said, Casares. And Best Screenplay, Guillermo del Toro, Antonio Trashores, David Muñoz, and Best Score, which it has a pretty decent score from what I remember.
Yes, it does. It's really good.
And guess what, David?
Yes.
This movie is on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list.
Is this our first one this season?
It's one of the few. We have not had many, but this one made the cut.
We have not. Well, I'm glad it did. I'm glad it deserved it. It is a really, really beautiful film, well told, great story, great cast. There's no, I don't, the only thing I would change about this movie at all is the title.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that happens sometimes with foreign films. Sometimes they do have weird titles.
Yeah. Agreed.
I only have one other little trivia bit before we move on to Keys. And that is that Guillermo, and this may have been taken out of context, this could have been said a while back, says that this is his favorite movie.
Good.
But it also, he could have said that the year it came out or the year after. I'm sure The Shape of Water is probably up there somewhere.
This is my favorite movie until Shape of Water.
Right,
then
exactly.
That is my favorite movie.
So, Keys?
Well, we have to do Pan's Labyrinth first. I mean, that's the biggest, and I think that's a huge key on this, or from this, because this was first, correct?
Yeah, this was first.
I have a couple that are interesting. I have Lord of the Flies, just because, especially the last half of this movie is basically the boys forming a group to fight against the bad guy.
Yeah,
And
I see that.
that whole microcosm of us against them, we have to form our own society, who's going to be the leader, yada yada, that sort of thing. So I think that was one of mine. Another one I had that this reminded me a lot of, and I think mainly because of the gold in it, and also the focus on the lead and his heroism kind of thing, was Empire of the Sun, Spielberg's Empire of the Sun, which is the story of essentially the lost boy who goes through the war. That's World War II. This is the Spanish American, or the Spanish Civil, but still, it's how war changes them and moves them. Much more graphic in Empire of the Sun than this, as far as war goes. But Carlos is a totally different person, I think, by the end of this movie, based on his experience. What about you?
Well, the first one that sticks out in my mind is a movie that you have not seen that I watched and talked about on one of my genre weeks several seasons back, called Under the Shadow. And it is a Persian horror film that gets really high marks on Rotten Tomatoes. But it is about an apartment building where a bomb has landed and is not detonated. And it is in the attic, I believe, of this building. But there's a ghost in this movie as well. As a matter of fact, it would have been a really interesting thing to pair this movie with that movie.
Interesting.
But, yeah. And it's a scary film from what I remember, but you can't ignore the similarity with two undetonated bombs and ghosts.
Right. And neither one of them made the Maximoff twins. So that's kind of interesting. I have, I mentioned it earlier, Ghost Story. There were moments in this reminding me of Ghost Story. The other one that I was confusing it with to begin with, I looked up, was called The Reflecting Skin.
Yes.
Again, it looks similar, although stories are totally diversely different. That one is, I think, the one about, I think my neighbor's a vampire. This one we're in an orphanage with a ghost.
Yeah.
But there's just a feel to the foreignness of each of them, because I think they're both Spanish. And they're both, there's just this feel of following it through the young boy's eyes kind of storytelling that it gave me a key element of it.
Yeah, I want to say I've seen that, but I can't remember. I think it may be on our list, but I know that title very well.
It's a good movie. I remember it being a very good movie, from what I remember. I also have an opposite key, or an anti-key, as we sometimes have. The Conjuring. Conjuring is like hugely popular and everything now, and it's about mean ghosts. And this is not mean ghosts. This is not a ghost who's trying to exact revenge. He's trying to get his story told. He wants the truth out, kind of thing. Right. And you get the impression that once the truth is told, he'll be gone. He'll be freed or whatever. That typical ghosts are bound by some thing here on earth and have to move on.
Well, that is a perfect segue to my next key, which you're going to probably think is kind of funny, and that's zombie movies, including The Walking Dead and Dawn of the Dead, because much like this film and a film Guillermo did called Crimson Peak, which is about a haunted house, the ghosts in both those films are not the monsters. It's the humans that are the monsters.
Yes.
And as I've beaten, like a dead horse, the zombie metaphor is that, the zombies are not the monsters. It's always the humans that are the bad guys in those movies. Yeah. And so there's a distinct key to me in these movies, or this movie and Crimson Peak, that goes into those as well.
Definitely. I think there's a trope cliche too in the the return of the person we thought was dead sort of thing in this too, because Casares, we think, is totally dead, comes back at the end, but then we have the flip that Guillermo does, which is he's the ghost. And I just loved that. I thought that was, but I was trying to think of what, a reference that comes from, but I know I've seen that trope before. We've all seen the, oh, I thought he was dead, but he came back trope. That was even in Scream, or something. But in this one, it's got a little clever twist to the end of it, which I thought was cool.
Another segue from that and from the one you mentioned earlier and that I mentioned earlier, Road Warrior, where we have a surprise narrator at the end, Sunset Boulevard.
Yes.
The guy in Sunset Boulevard that's narrating that story is dead. And the guy narrating this story is dead.
I have that in my thing as Sunset Boulevard, dead narrator, because there's a Yellowstone is that really popular series that's been out for years. Yeah. And there's 2 spinoffs of it. One is like 1883 or whatever, and one's 1923, whatever. But a young girl is the narrator in both of those stories. Yet she's not a character at all in the second series. And I read the other day that yet she's the voice of it, and she's like becoming the voice of the family. It was a really cool changeover, even though she's not in the series at all, a la Already Dead or whatever. She's still narrating the story. And I was going to ask you, is there a writer term for that? Because Sunset Boulevard was the first time I ever remember that happening, of a narrator who is obviously dead from the very beginning of the movie, and yet they narrate the entire thing, even action post their death.
I mean, I'm sure there's others, but Sunset Boulevard has to be the king of them.
And you wouldn't call that an unreliable narrator, right? I mean,
no, I did earlier, and that's not really right. I would just call it an unknown narrator.
Okay.
Until the end when it's revealed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about unreliable narrators, I think, in another one, and that's a different thing, really.
Yeah. And I will add that normally in my structure, I do my initial notes and my initial, the details about the production or whatever. And then I do what's called watch notes, which maybe one day we'll publish or blog or whatever. But this one, I literally had 2 watch notes because I was so enamored with the movie. I didn't even take it. I was like, this is just really good.
Yeah. To give people a brief synopsis, I mean, I'm not, because we talked about doing a bonus episode where we talk about our process. Yeah. But my process is to hit IMDb first, and I cut and paste what I feel like's relevant into a notes thing. Then when I'm watching the movie, I don't have anything but my phone and my email open, and I just type in films. And then it's like, those are the key films. I'm like, oh, hey, there's that.
Oh, okay. That's great. Yeah.
And sometimes I'm amazed by how many I have, because one that's coming up, I had like a whole list of them.
That's cool.
Another one that this movie, I think a big key of makeup wise is The Ring or Ringu, the Japanese movie, because the ghost looks very pale and very similar, only male instead of female.
Well, and I believe that one was wet as well. That ghost was wet.
Yeah, because it comes out of a well. Yeah. She comes out of a well. He comes out of a reservoir.
She has the water, all her hair down, and all that stuff. Yeah.
And what is that reservoir anyway? I mean, is it drinking water? Because it's kind of gross and it has a dead body in it.
I thought it was something with the mining process.
Oh, okay.
That was like where they clean the mining tools or they smelt stuff or something. That's the impression I got. That's why it's kind of gold colored. But I also think he did that again because of his color palette, but also I remember he actually says something at the beginning, like in that opening narration that I love so much. He actually says something like, ghosts are like insects trapped in amber. And it's that allusion to when we see the mosquito in amber kind of thing, which led to Jurassic Park, yada, yada.
Right.
But he makes an allusion to that's what ghosts are, is they're trapped in a moment in time and they can't get out of that moment. And which has dual meaning at the very, very end when you realize he's trapped there in that orphanage now because he died there, his moment in time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good.
That's where the title should come from. They should play on that concept for the title.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like Moments in Amber or something. Yeah.
Because that's more the theme of the movie. Yeah.
So true. Very, very good, Tim. That's very true.
As if I did that for a living. The only other two I lifted directly from IMDb, and they are both Spanish related, so they're really not going to have a lot to do with anything we know. But apparently, an important source of information to Guillermo was a Spanish comic series called Parasuelos.
Okay.
I know nothing about that, but it is a semi-biographical work that takes place in a Francois orphanage during the early 1950s. And Carlos Jimenez, who I think I'm pronouncing that right, who wrote that, worked as a storyboard artist on this film.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a crew key in there as well. The comic it was inspired on, the illustrator or writer was used by Guillermo to storyboard this movie.
Okay.
So that's interesting to me. And then lastly, this one really doesn't mean much to us, but the character of Jamie was inspired by a famous Spanish comic writer named Carlos. Oh, the same guy, Carlos Jimenez. So Jamie was based on Carlos too, as well. And
Jamie was the bully, right?
Well, okay. Yeah, the one that ends up being a good guy in the long run.
Yeah, yes. the good bully. Yes.
Well, he's not a good bully at first. I kind of wanted to smack him.
Oh man, I did too. I was mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in summary,
yes. I guess I would say I would highly recommend you ignore the title of this movie and watch it, because it is much more depth and much more than what you imagine. It has twists and turns you don't expect. It has some incredible performances and some incredible cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen Pacific Rim, but I would say, other than that, maybe, I don't know, because I haven't seen it, all of Guillermo's movies pack an incredible punch because they're so well-rounded in every aspect. Story, visuals, effects.
I would think, what's the giant cockroach one? That Mimic. One is not.
Okay.
But he has said himself that that's not the story he wanted to tell. The studio took it away from him. That's one of the reasons he left and went and did his own. And thank God he did. But you're right. Shape of Water, this, other ones that I've seen. I have not seen Pacific Rim either, nor am I likely to, because I don't like giant robots. But eventually I'll probably have to because of this podcast.
It's sci-fi.
It is sci-fi, unfortunately. Yes, that is a subgenre I don't aspire to. But yeah, I think he is a brilliant filmmaker and has deserved the recognition that he is getting.
Yeah, when he gets what I would call his pet projects, and also the clout he has now, where he can do what he wants to do.
Yes.
There's no stopping him. I mean, he is just, he's excellent in every aspect of filmmaking.
Well, it's interesting. I would love to see, and maybe there's some kind of retrospect or biography or something we can find on the three of them, like you call the three amigos. Because I remember watching Revenant and just being blown away with the cinematography of that movie and his single shot things. Some of them go on for like 6 or 8 minutes. And they're an entire Indian raiding party with a one camera shot. which means people are getting hit with arrows, shot with guns, scalped, falling off horses, all this, all in one shot that doesn't cut. And it is incredible. And not the other one, Alfonso Cuarón did Gravity. Gravity's opening scene is like 8 or 11 minutes.
It's amazing.
And it's amazing. And so telling a story with the camera is what they are doing best, whether it's cinematically the way that Del Toro tells his stories, or whether it's these unique shots. Because didn't Cuarón also do Men of Earth?
It's the Children of Men, isn't it?
Children of Men.
Yeah, we've covered 2 of his.
Yeah, which is a great movie too. But
right.
But again,
what's cool is he is more sci-fi, whereas Guillermo's more horror.
More horror.
So we've got 2 of them in both of our worlds. The guy that did The Revenant, I've never seen it. All I knew was that Leonardo DiCaprio gets mauled by a bear or something.
Boy, does he! And you'll believe it too. It looks like they really did it. Okay. I mean, I was going, if I had not seen Leonardo at the awards, I would think he's in the hospital.
Okay. Well, now you're making me want to see it, though. And it's funny that you said how these are very visual filmmakers, because I would lump Almodovar in there as being an incredibly visual movie maker too, and mainly his palette. He loves bright color. When I think of Almodovar, I just think of bright colors.
Yeah. True.
So that's 4 Spanish filmmakers. One is Mexican. I think the other 2 are Spanish. I can't remember. And Almodovar is definitely Spanish. Spanish language filmmakers that are very visual directors, for sure.
And what about you? Last thoughts or final thoughts, or what do you think?
I would highly recommend this movie. And as far as Del Toro movies, it's up there with The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth, for sure. Crimson Peak falls a little short for me. I need to see it again. I think the reason I don't like Crimson Peak as much is there's a lot of CGI in it, and I think it kind of bothered me.
Okay.
So I'll have to look at it again. I think it's on our list, so maybe we'll look at it together. So
we should. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you all out there for listening to us, for watching us on YouTube, for doing all those kind of things. As always, when we wrap up, we have to tell the litany of please take the few minutes it would take you to give us a brief review, especially on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. That way you know what was coming and what we're doing and all of that kind of stuff. And give us a shout out, either email or however. You can visit us at johnnyhasthekeys.com, of course, and see all past episodes, all 5 thrilling, amazing seasons that we have done. We also have Patreon. So if you are interested in supporting us a little bit, we would love to have you help us continue to do this. We also have special things for our Patreons. 2 of them are other podcasts that we do. One is called X-Files Declassified, which is where we examine the X-Files episode by episode. And the other one is the Dilithium Chamber, where we do Star Trek, the original series, and we're into season 2 now of that.
Yeah. There's also new merch on our website too.
Yes,
for people.
There's some great merch, and nothing would make us happier than you getting some of our merch, and then maybe even sending us a picture of you wearing it somewhere. Yeah. We would love to see that.
Or maybe running into you at a convention wearing it.
Yes, with you wearing it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And until next week, Tim, I think we'll be in horror world again, probably.
Oh my God, I can't remember.
I think we are. I think we're scared.
I think we are. No. Actually, next week is sci-fi, but next week is
sci-fi. It's sci-fi horror.
Yeah, it's sci-fi horror. I'll go as far as to give everyone a little hint. It's Roger Corman.
Oh, there we go. That'll be so lovely. Can't wait.
All right, I'll be seeing you, David.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.